I've waited quite a long time for this. Valkyrie, Formula One circuit. Yeah, I've had worse days. Coming back through it. It's a bit overwhelming, just the amount of vibration and noise in here. Just feels like the engine's bolted to my thumb. Physical as well. I know it's got number plates, but I'm not sure I can handle this on the road from my home. God. Okay. It's got such a clever hydraulic suspension system. It's managing so much of what I'm doing. I'm lacking a bit of connection. The sensor mass doesn't feel necessarily as light as I thought it was. It's an incredible machine. The world's definitely a better place for it. Is it perfect? No, it's not. Gear shift is actually quite slow. When you've got this much power, it doesn't really matter. Then you just manage the corners and the braking zones, get it lined up. I like the afterburners. God. So much torque put up. So nice to drive something that isn't heavily turbocharged. We really are at the limits of what a street car can do. In seconds, when it spools up. Whoa! Yeah, okay. So, it's complicated. It's not as conventional feeling as I thought at times. Feels like I'm not fully connected to it, but if you try and push too hard, gets a bit messy. You just need to settle into the way it wants to go around the circuit, and then you're just in awe of what it can do with the numbers. The 1,000 horsepower, normally aspirated V12 hypercar from Aston Martin it's as exciting as I'd expected. It's just a remarkable engine with some clever electronics. The world is definitely a better place because this exists. And if you do end up lucky enough to own one of these, get some earplugs because it's so loud. So unsurprisingly, Aston Martin with 1155 horsepower is a bit sprightly on track. You need the Cup 2R tyre without a doubt, in my opinion, but it's an object, isn't it? Just look at it. It's tiny. It's full of negative space. There's more holes in it than there is material.
And yet look at what Aston has found room for. Cosworth's 1015 brake horsepower 6.5 litre V12 is rigid mounted to the back of the carbon tub, which explains the noise and vibration. The transaxle gearbox sits behind that with a 140 horsepower electric motor contained within it. That has three main jobs. It torque fills for the 7-speed sequential during gear shifts, it gets the car rolling to save the clutch, and if you press the button on the steering wheel, you get a useful extra boost. The motor's battery was developed by Rimac. It's small, just 1.7 kilowatt hours, and is recharged by the V12. You can't plug it in, and there's no rear subframe. All the suspension is hung from the powertrain. This saves weight and originally allowed Aston to claim a 1-to-1 power-to-weight ratio, but the weight has increased during development. The Valkyrie now weighs 1,270 kilograms, and that's before fluids are added. It's a compact car, shorter than a 911, only a little wider and almost a foot lower. And if you can bring yourself to ignore the way it looks for a moment, what really stands out are the little details. The aluminium badge on the front is 40 microns thick. That's thinner than a hair follicle. I know, ironic given what I look like. The high-level brake light at the rear has got the luminescence that's required, but actually it had to make it thicker so you could fit the EU mark on the actual lens of it. The attention to detail is, well, it's insane. In fact, even now, it's clunking and whirring and doing things. It's basically thinking. It's like a sentient being. The crazy thing is, though, and I can't believe I'm saying this, you get out of this and think it's the fastest car anyone will ever drive. But there's a faster one. This is the Valkyrie AMR Pro. It's track only, and the only things it has in common with the standard car are the engine and the headlights. The hybrid system is jettisoned and everything else has changed. And it is much, much faster. To show you how much, I sent Ollie out in the regular Valkyrie and then gave a chase.
I've got something catching me.
This is driving the Nirvana. This is fast tanker petrol stuff.
I haven't got the apex speed yet.
What a machine!
Oh, there he goes. Oh, wow.
In a straight line, there's not much in it. The road car is more powerful and slippery through the air, but the track car has the better power-to-weight ratio. However, around corners, they are night and day different. The AMR Pro runs a Michelin slick, has significantly more downforce, and weighs over 1/4 of a tonne less. It tears chunks of time and distance out of the regular car and feels more settled and planted while doing it. The brakes don't suffer from the road car's long travel, and the gear changes are instant. It's an addictive thing to drive, not only grippier but better balanced, and what it can do through the fast stuff is outrageous. I had more confidence in it because without the complex hydraulic suspension and hybrid, it's more natural to drive and communicates better. And every moment you drive it, you're exposed to this magnificent engine and its never-ending V12 music. It's an utter delight and makes the AMR Pro one of the most special motorcars I've had the pleasure of driving. The biggest shame of all is it will never go racing. It also exposes the regular Valkyrie as a far more compromised track car than I'd expected, given its F1 Adrian Newey pedigree. But we shouldn't get carried away with the AMR Pro. Getting the road car done, despite its flaws, is the bigger achievement here. I'm glad the Valkyrie exists, because I strongly suspect that it nearly didn't. But I'm left frustrated with the knowledge that there's a truly history-changing vehicle just waiting to be unlocked from underneath that extraordinary bodywork.
Here it is. It's called the Nevera. It's powered by electricity, and it doesn't come from Italy, or Germany, or Britain, or Japan, or even America. No, the Nevera comes from Croatia. Now, Croatia. Lovely place, cracking seafood scene, but not one with any history of building fast cars, or any history of building any cars. But this Nevera could be the car to put Croatia on the car map, because it's built by a company called Rimac. Rimac's barely a decade old, but it's already worked its electric wizardry for the likes of Porsche, Aston Martin, Ferrari and Koenigsegg. Last year, it took control of Bugatti. In short, Rimac means business. And with the Nevera, it's very much going it alone. See, normally, if you're a startup car maker, you buy all your bits off the shelf. You get your headlights from Ford, steering wheel from Volvo, engine from GM, and then you wrap it all in some fancy new bodywork. But Rimac hasn't done that. The Nevera is built completely from scratch. The only bits this car shares with any other on the planet are the tyres and a few bits of the aircon. Everything else, battery, motors, software, single-piece carbon fibre chassis, is bespoke. As business plans go, that's like opening your own pizzeria and deciding that instead of buying in any ingredients, you'll grow your own wheat, your tomatoes, your pineapple, your buffalo. I mean, it's a ruinously stupid idea, and it's why no one does it. But somehow, Rimac has made it work. And more remarkable still, they've actually made it rather well. It's comfy in here. I mean, the seat's pretty good. Everything's covered in expensive materials. I can see out of the thing perfectly well. I mean, I wouldn't call it a luxury motor car, but it's beautifully built. And it's practical-ish. I mean, it's fitted with the largest battery of any electric vehicle, so it'll do 300 miles on a single charge. As products from companies you've never heard of go, it's all very convincing. How much they want you to pay for it, on the other hand, might take a little more convincing. Because this upstart costs, wait for it, £2 million. Now that's not Ferrari money, that's not even Lamborghini money, that's Bugatti money, it's private jet money, that's punchy. Luckily, the Nevera does have a little trick up its sleeve that might go some way to justifying its enormous price tag. A little trick that requires a rather long runway to demonstrate. Now, I probably should have mentioned this earlier, but even by conventional supercar standards, the Nevera is quite powerful. You see, it's got one electric motor for each wheel, combined power output just under 2,000 horsepower. That is a lot. So what does it feel like? Oh my lord.
That's 100, 130, 150, 170. This is ridiculous. 190. That's 200. She's still pulling. That's 212. Right, that is absolutely mind-scramblingly fast. Good Lord. That's not driving, that's an out-of-body experience. In fact, the Nevera accelerates to 60 miles an hour in under 2 seconds. And whereas electric cars up to now have always run out of puff the further north of 100 they go,
this car is limited to 219.
Now what we need here is a bit of context. To my left, we have a Lamborghini Aventador SVJ. By any standards, a very, very fast car. Watch what happens now.
3, 2, 1, go!
Oh my. He's just disappearing. I can't begin to describe. He's not even there. He's gone. I can barely see him in my mirror. Over the line. That speck in the mirror that I can hardly see is one of the fastest Lamborghinis ever made. It's not a beating, it's a mauling. Tell you what, the old guard better get ready for it, because this is all new for me. It's all new for everyone.
The remarkable thing about the Nevera isn't that it's the fastest accelerating road car ever built. It's the sheer scale of the leap in performance it's made.
Round 2. Let's give the Aventador a better chance this time. It's 300 metres up the runway, and we're going to run over a standing mile. Watch this.
3, 2, 1, go!
Here we go. It can't do it, can it? How can it possibly catch that Lamborghini? We're catching it. We're catching it. I can't believe this. It's absolutely absurd. Oh my Lord. That's outrageous. I'm doing 219 miles an hour. Wow!
And it doesn't stop there. In case all that straight line fun wears off, Rimac says they've been to town on the handling too. Each wheel's motor is independently controlled, so the way the Nevera drives can be transformed at the flick of a switch. A switch that includes drift mode.
Dear me! This is a drift beast like I've never been before. It's so easy. It's just wind the lock on, bit of throttle. Oh, they're clever. They're clever, and it's fun. It's fun and it's silly. This car slides. It feels fantastic when it's moving around. I know it doesn't have the noise, but when you've got this performance, I'm starting to wonder if you care.
Of course, we have seen this sort of digital drifting before. In recent years, it's become pretty much the standard party mode for performance cars all over the market. But this being Rimac, in the Nevera, there's also an after party. 4-wheel drive, no traction control, all wheels spinning.
Here we go. Good God. What is going on in this car? We just did a tyre in one skid. That's just ridiculous. Mr. Rimac, you are my kind of lunatic. Yes, you are. I don't quite know what to say about that. Wow.
Greatest and fastest hypercar ever to pop out of Christian von Koenigsegg's sizable head. Only 125 will ever be made, costing around £2.3 million each. It uses a 5.1 litre twin turbo flat plane crank V8. Produces 1,578 brake horsepower and 1,106 pounds-feet of torque. To rev from idle to 8,500 RPM in 0.2 seconds. Keep it pinned, my son. Keep it pinned, Jack. 0 to 62 takes around 2.5 seconds, and theoretically, the top speed on this slightly softer, slippier Absolute version is the scary side of 310 miles an hour. 310! I say theoretical because no one's had the brass balls or the space to hit it yet. But they will. I think I need a lie down. But then again, you only live once, don't you? We're going again. We're definitely going again. But the engine isn't even the most impressive bit. That goes to the new 9-speed Lightspeed transmission that laughs in the general direction of a twin-clutch box. It features 2 sets of 3 gears, creating 9 possible ratios, which means 6 individual clutches for the forward gears and a 7th for reverse. So all gears are constantly engaged and ready. And the benefits are many. Not only can you jump from one gear to any of the others, but it's also smaller and 2/3 the weight of a comparable double clutcher. Plus, it means the engine doesn't need a flywheel. Hence its appetite for revving like a superbike. Honestly, the short stack of those first 5 or 6 gears, I just keep smashing into the limiter. I can't pull the paddles fast enough because the way this engine revs, it's like a really, really eager, naturally aspirated engine. It's got that hardcore edge to the sound as well, but you've got all that torque and all that turbocharged grunt as well. The spec is the stuff of sticky teenage dreams. We've got carbon fibre panels, carbon fibre tub, carbon fibre wheels, carbon ceramic brakes, clamped by in-house designed calipers. You'll find the Christian doesn't really like to buy in any technology that he can make better himself. All in, this car weighs 1,390 kilograms dry, which is 30 kilograms less than the Attack model, although in the Attack you do get 1,000 kilograms of downforce at 171 miles an hour, whereas in the Absolute version, 150 kilograms. If you're unaware of Christian von Koenigsegg and his boutique hypercar company, you're in for a treat. It all began back in 1994 when a 22-year-old Christian founded Koenigsegg Automotive. His mission? To build the greatest supercar the world had ever seen. A concept vehicle, the Koenigsegg CC, was first seen in 1996, but it wasn't until 2002 that the CC8S, Koenigsegg's first production car, finally arrived, scooping the Guinness World Record for the world's most powerful production engine, with a mere 655 horsepower. In 2003, a fire broke out at the original thatch-roofed factory, but Christian remained undeterred, launching the heavily upgraded 806 horsepower CCR in 2004, a car that hit 241 miles an hour at Nardo, officially ending the McLaren F1's reign as the world's fastest car. Next up in 2006 was the CCX, which stood as the fastest car around the Top Gear test track for 7 years, despite the Stig having a rare glitch and binning it into a tyre wall. In 2007, the CCXR added E85 compatibility and lots more power. 2010 saw the arrival of the Agera, which evolved through various RS 1-to-1 and RS configurations, hoovering up more speed records as it went. In 2015, the hybrid Regera arrived with its funky direct drive gearbox and immediately melted any tyres within a 5-mile radius. In 2019, we got our first glimpse of the Jesko, a new generation of Koenigsegg hypercar with 300 mph plus potential, a distillation of everything learned over the last 2 decades. And then, in 2020, we got to see the Gemera, a 1700 horsepower 3-cylinder plug-in hybrid 4-seater, Koenigsegg's typically restrained take on a family car. And we also got to see the Jesko Absolut, a more streamlined, road-focused version of the Jesko. And that's the one we're driving today. Alright, just a few things to point out to help you mark out the Absolute model from the Attack. And the first thing is you have a less aggressive front splitter on the Absolute model, and here the wheel arch vents are this rather attractive hole punched carbon fibre rather than big gaping vents that you get in the Attack model. These wheels are absolutely sensational. Hollow core carbon fibre. They are actually hollow and made from 650 individual pieces of hand-laid carbon fibre, and metallic finish is quite special too. What they do is sand down the natural epoxy layer that forms on the top of the carbon fibre and then polish it up by hand. No one else does it because it just takes too long. And then the real difference is around the back of the Absolute model. No massive rear wing, but you do get these rather cool carbon fibre Batmobile style fins here, which help stability at high speed and help reduce drag. And the rear end itself is slightly wider, it's got a more sharper cut-off. That all helps with the aerodynamics of the car. You can have aero disc wheels on the rear wheels as well, because that's such an area of high turbulence. Cut in a shot of those aero disc wheels now, because they are so cool. And now for the really nerdy bit. Koenigsegg has something called a triplex damper system. It's effectively a horizontal damper and spring that they fit at the rear and the front, and that helps reduce dive under braking and squat under acceleration. Now in the Attack model, you've got that in the front and the back. In the Absolute, you've only got one in the back. No spring, just the triplex damper, and you don't have one at all in the front. And the benefits of that are you can remove this roof panel and you've actually got somewhere to store it, which is handy. The interior is fairly sparse. A portrait screen in the dash, a couple of cup holders, an instrument screen attached to the steering wheel that stays level even as you wind the lock on and works brilliantly. And there's more space for two in here than any Koenigsegg that's gone before. And now I must make a confession, because earlier I got a little bit overexcited when I said this car produces nearly 1600 horsepower. It will, but only if you're running on E85 biofuel. Now you can buy E85 at pretty much every petrol station in Sweden. It costs about 20% less than super unleaded, but it will go about 30% less far on a tank. Today we'll be running on super unleaded, which unfortunately means we're going to have to make do with 1,262 brake horsepower. The things I have to put up with, eh? So, the name Jesko. It's named after Christian von Koenigsegg's father, the man who helped him get this incredible company off the ground 28 years ago, which got us thinking. When they first launched the Jesko at the Geneva Motor Show, they made a small batch of Jesko beer. So what if we took a couple of bottles of Jesko, 2 Jesko, in a Jesko? The plan couldn't be simpler. Jesko actually lives 5 hours north of the Koenigsegg factory, which is in Ängelholm, Sweden, so we kindly agreed to travel south and meet us at a family friend's house nearby. As a Brucey bonus, getting there will give us a chance to drive the Jesko on the public road. A car that's this fast, this capable of over 300 miles an hour, for God's sake, has absolutely no right being this easy to drive at legal speeds. Anyone these days can just buy a 1,000 horsepower plus crate engine and drop it into anything, but getting all the components to talk to each other, to work in harmony at low speeds, at everyday speeds, that's the real challenge. That's where the engineering finesse comes in. So the steering is really light, it's got a whip crack fast ratio to it, and I like that. It suits the fizzy nature of the V8 engine behind you. The brakes are superb. I'm not even troubling them at road speeds, and they did the job on the track earlier. And then there's this 9-speed gearbox, which is really interesting actually, because you do get the occasional clunky shift. Full bore upshifts can be quite a violent kick in the back, but I suppose that's in keeping with the car's brutal nature. But it's the way that they group the gear ratio. So the steps between gears 1, 2 and 3 are super close, they're right on top of each other, and then between 4, 5 and 6 they're slightly wider, and then 7, 8 and 9 they're wider still. So I'm in 6th gear here now. If I upshift to 7th, you feel the revs drop right off, and it means that this car actually can behave as a perfectly good cruiser. The ride is certainly comfortable enough to do really good distance. In terms of that engine, it basically sounds and feels naturally aspirated. You can get some turbo lag to rear its head if you really get one of the high gears and put your foot down, and it takes a while to spool up, but you know, otherwise it makes some monstrous noises. If you get this engine on the overrun, here we go, we'll give it to the beans in 5th and then lift off. Can you hear that? Sounds like a flipping firework display. I've driven some hypercars in my time. I've driven some very, very fast cars, and all of them are pretty amazing feats of engineering, but most of them leave me in awe, but not actually wanting one. But this Jesko, honestly, it's an all-rounder. Wasn't expecting that.
And then, after many miles and a stop for some willies, we arrived at the Koenigsegg family friend's modest pile to deliver our package to Jesko.
Hello?
Oh,
Jesko, hello.
No.
I've brought you, Jesko, some Jesko in the Jesko. I've been waiting to say that
Jack,
for quite a while.
let's go in.
We should. Let's go and enjoy these. Cheers.
Cheers.
Or should we say, is it skål? Skål in Swedish. Tell me, what was Christian like when he was a kid? Very good.
5 years ago, Mercedes announced it was going to do something properly exciting. Take the engine from Lewis Hamilton's Formula One car and put it into a road car. A great idea, but as Merck quickly found out, almost impossible to actually achieve. The project's been a bit of a disaster. Years have gone by, deadlines came and went, CEOs were shown the door, and then everything went quiet. Until recently, when Mercedes phoned and said, remember that road car we put Lewis's F1 engine in? Well, it's finished. Here, at long last, is the AMG 1. Fashionably late to the tune of 3 years, this is £2.5 million worth of Mercedes F1 know-how poured into a car that you can legally drive on the road. The car that many thought would never happen is finally here. Wow. And the only question now is, what on earth is it like from behind the wheel?
So I've just started off in full electric mode. Here we go, going out onto track in a car with a modern... There's the engine. Tell you what, it's noisy in here. Much noisier inside than outside. There it goes. Just keeps revving. Noise is sensational. It's a mighty, mighty experience.
F1 rules state that teams can only use 1.6-litre V6 engines.
So that's what's sitting at the heart of the AMG 1. A V6 engine that can spin up to a stratospheric 11,000 RPM.
So I have about 560 horsepower from the engine, and the rest, which adds up to over 1,000 horsepower, is coming from electric motors. 0 to 60, 2.9 seconds, top speed 219 miles an hour. They sound enormous numbers, don't they? But of course, that's not much quicker than some high-end supercars.
The one hasn't been conceived to sit at the top of a deck of top trumps, though. Think of it instead as a challenge.
With the AMG1, you actually have 5 motors. You've got that internal combustion engine, that's a motor. 2 motors on the front wheels and a motor coming off the crank as well. And the 5th one's actually in the turbocharger to help it reduce lag.
Putting all of this together is pretty much automotive Everest. An engineering mountain so great that Mercedes engineers just had to see if they could.
It's not like anything I've driven before.
So the powertrain just stopped, the engine stopped, and it then just restarted itself.
Assuming Mercedes engineers weren't intending unexpected pit stops to be part of the owner experience, the early signs were that there was still a bit of mountain left to climb.
So the problem was, twice during full braking, when I was on a downshift and the revs went high, the auto blip would blip the throttle, and then the engine would just cut.
Quite why the engine is cutting out under braking turns out to be a tricky problem to diagnose. So much so, in fact, that Mercedes wheels out a second car to get us back up and running. So, where were we?
Racing cars have to comply with 1 million regulations, but road cars, well, they have to comply with 1 million totally different regulations. Put the two together, this must be the most complicated road car ever made. No wonder it's having some teething problems now. The chassis is the bit that I'm finding a little bit tricky at the moment. Whatever I do, I've got this understeer. I can't really get rid of it.
And the bigger problem is, while they've been trying to get it all working out on track, you get the feeling Mercedes hasn't had the chance to sort all the other stuff that makes a road car livable.
The noise, again, I come back to it, it's so extreme, I've actually put some earplugs in. I'm just bolted straight into the chassis and the engine's bolted to that. So I'm kind of connected to the vehicle in a way you aren't in most supercars. Steering wheel is a strange shape. Seating position, I'm not so sure really. The seat is fixed, the pedals move, but someone tall is going to struggle in this thing. And the seat, there's not much support, I'm kind of moving around in it. How do you maintain a Formula One engine on the road? Well, Mercedes is saying that you'll need an engine rebuild every 30,000 miles. Doesn't seem unreasonable, but it will cost you £700,000.
Or at least it will, if you get that far.
Oh, right. Well, the aero limit is now coming on. So it just stops at 145 k's. Oh, dear. I tell you what, it's not been an easy day for the AMG1.
The second car now has an issue with the sensor on its active rear wing, which in turn has triggered a speed limiter on the engine.
Tell you what, if you paid £2.5 million for it, you wouldn't be over the moon.
But after a lot more head scratching to get around all the bugs in the drivetrain and aero systems, the fix that the engineers come up with is a promising one. Putting the AMG1 into its most extreme drive mode would force the car to deploy maximum aero and maximum performance for one last run. That mode is the same one Lewis Hamilton uses in F1 qualifying, and it's called Strat 2.
Quite serious. God, it's fast through there. Woo! That's where the aero really is working. The concept just makes me grin while I'm sitting here. This is the engine that genuinely won World Championships. And that noise. Oh, what a noise.
When that incredible engine and those ridiculously aggressive wings actually start working together, this car finally starts to make some sort of sense.
Do you know what, once you're in it, it feels so much more special. Because that engine's unlike anything I've ever driven before. And it's 1.6 litres. Get your head around that. And I love the fact that it revs to 11. Nothing revs to 11.
The AMG 1 then might well be a flawed machine, but that doesn't stop it being one of the most fascinating, intriguing cars I've ever driven.
There was a word for this summer project years ago. It was called a folly. Something that was just so fraught with difficulties you wonder why someone would bother. I suppose I have to ask myself, do I think it was worth it? Because it's not the best driving or fastest supercar I've driven, let alone hypercar. But there's just something so appealing about it when it's up and running. When it's up and running, it's unlike any other driving experience I've had. And at the end of it all, this is an engine from a Formula One car. And that's probably enough for me.
The Porsche Mission X, first revealed a few days ago at Porsche's big 75th anniversary bash at the museum in Zuffenhausen, now parked up in a shed somewhere near Paris so we can have a proper poke around it without all the crowds getting in the way. What is it? It's Porsche's vision of what an all-electric hypercar could look like. They haven't actually confirmed that they're going to build it, but trust me, they are, probably by about 2027. But before we get into the frankly outrageous performance targets for this thing, join me in the car park. Oh look, how handy. Parked just outside is the 959 Carrera GT and 918 Spider, Porsche's Incredibles, and the bloodline of boundary-pushing hypercars that's led us to the Mission X's door. We start with the Porsche 959. In the mid-80s, the concept was first shown in 1983. This thing took the 911 template and then turned it into a rolling laboratory. So the panels are made from an aluminium Kevlar composite. It's got a 2.8 litre flat six with 444 horsepower. It's got some very trick suspension that's self-leveling, allows the aero to work properly, and it can split the torque between the front and rear axles. It's four-wheel drive, of course, and it can do nearly 200 miles an hour. Bill Gates has one of these apparently. Obviously, he likes all that computing power. Moving on to 2003, you'll notice that these come in neat 10-year intervals, and we meet the Carrera GT. Again, highly advanced, but in different ways. This one came with a carbon fibre monocoque. You've got a 5.7 litre naturally aspirated V10 with just over 600 horsepower that revs like a McLaren F1. It's got a manual gearbox. It famously has a very tricky ceramic clutch, but that's all made up for by the fact that you've got this gorgeous wooden gear lever in there mounted high on the centre console. About as aggressive as a mid-engine supercar gets. Moving on to 2013 and the Porsche 918 Spider. Now, of the Holy Trinity, the three hybrid hypercars that came along at roughly the same time, the LaFerrari, the McLaren P1, and this is the most hybrid. It's the one that can run on e-power alone, but it's not soft because you've got a 4.6 litre naturally aspirated V8 and all those batteries and motors producing 875 brake horsepower in total. It's 10 years old, but it still looks fresh and it still feels forward thinking in terms of its technology. Right, that's the past then. Should we have a look at the future? If I'm honest, I was rather hoping Porsche was still going to find a way to cram a combustion engine into the Mission X, but no. They pretty much perfected hybrid with the 918, so now it's time for a new challenge. Time to see what pure electric can do. Firstly, the bad news. There is no official power figure for this car yet, only that Porsche wants a 1-to-1 power to weight ratio. So if they manage to hit 1500 kilograms and therefore 1500 horsepower, I'm going to be mightily impressed, but it's probably going to slip to around 1700, isn't it? Either way, they want this thing to be the fastest road car ever around the Nürburgring. The lap record at the moment stands at 6 minutes 35, set by the AMG 1, and realistically it's probably going to tumble even further in the next 3 or 4 years while they develop this car. Performance figures, there aren't any, we're guessing, but over 200 miles an hour and 0 to 60 in under 2 seconds seems entirely reasonable. There's no word on battery size either, only that thanks to a new 900 volt architecture it will accept charge at twice the rate of a Taycan Turbo S, so 500 kilowatt plus. And rather than a skateboard layout, the battery chest will be behind the seats to keep the seating position and roof low and to keep the centre of mass in the middle of the car. They've also dropped some hints about the downforce, mainly that it will have lots. Well in excess, Porsche says, of the new GT3 RS, which is a bit of a downforce monster. It produces 860 kilograms at 177 miles an hour, and this is going to have more, which is very remarkable when you look at the rather clean silhouette of this car. There's no ironing board front splitter, there's not any huge swan neck rear wing at the back, which leads me to believe that there are some very clever things going on underneath the Mission X, suckering this thing down onto the road. If I'm being totally honest, I was a bit underwhelmed when I first saw pictures of the Mission X, possibly something to do with the distinctly brown rocket metallic paint, and then I started to appreciate just how mad the proportions are on this thing, and it started winning me over. So at 4.5 metres long and 2 metres wide, it's pretty much the same footprint as a 918 Spider. In fact, it looks a fair bit smaller and more compact than I thought it was when I first saw those pictures. But the real trick here is when you look at it in profile, I thought this was a really cab-forward stance. I just spoke to the exterior designer. He said, nah, your eyes are playing tricks on you. What's actually going on here is this roofline here falls away much quicker than it does in the 918 Spider, giving the impression that this bubble canopy is further forward. And then there's the details. Starting here with the headlights, which are a new take on Porsche's classic 4-block lighting motif thing. And they also open like a pair of eyes when you switch the car on. I haven't seen it myself yet, but I'm told it's very fancy. Hopefully we can drop in an animation of that for you all to see. Come down the side, the wheels, so 20-inch at the front, 21-inch at the back. They're super lightweight, made from magnesium. And then we get to the really good stuff, the glass canopy up here. Well, it's almost all glass. There's this carbon fibre exoskeleton holding it all together, and the doors are really cool. Like the 917 Racer, and they pop up into your hand and take most of the roof with them. I've just got to close them now without upsetting anyone. I think we got away with that. Coming down the side of the car, you've got the rear view mirrors here, actually mounted on the rear quarters of the car. You've got a little cheetah sticker down here. I think they're suggesting that this car is quite quick. I don't really know. The charging port here. And if we come around the back, oh, There's aero fins on the rear wheel here to help expel the hot air, and only on the rear wheels. And look at what fun you can have when you don't have exhaust pipes to deal with. The way that this roofline just plummets away and tucks under this spoiler bridge here, and then you've got this floating full width rear light bar mounted inside these fairly intricate little housings that I'm told are machined from a single billet and a Eurotunnel sized diffuser. Right, should we have a look inside?
On the inside, it's like a Kinder Egg with brown and white chocolate living happily side by side.
So the lighter colour here on the steering wheel and on the seat behind me, that marks out the driver's territory. The brown stuff is for everyone else. And what's really interesting about this interior is the fact that, yes, it's highly digital. There are screens everywhere. You've got a curved screen, bit like you get in the Taycan with your instruments behind the wheel. You've got screens instead of wing mirrors. You've got screens instead of a rear view mirror. You've got the central screen here, and you've got the screen over here in front of the passenger. But what Porsche is doing is infusing all of that with analog elements. It's trying to keep analog alive, which I absolutely love. So you've got a big chunky switch here for switching the car on, even though you're not going to fire up an engine. It's something to do and twist and hold. And then this steering wheel, clearly inspired by motorsport in front of me. It's almost a yoke, not quite a yoke. We'll give Porsche the benefit of the doubt here. It's got physical switches all over it, and some of the most satisfying click to these paddles behind the wheel. But what are paddles doing in an electric car that only has a 1-speed gearbox? Well, apparently these two here adjust the brake bias, and on the left it adjusts the level of recuperation. Here on the central screen you've got physical switches that actually click along the edge of it here, and the screen that I mentioned in front of the passenger, that's a clock, so you can keep your lap times, but it's also got an analog clock as well. It does feel fantastic in here. It's super racy, as I said. The seats are part of the monocoque. You've got this motorsports inspired wheel in front of you. The glass just feels like it goes on forever. The visibility is insane, and yet it's beautifully done. There's a luxury to it. There's a quality of finish, and it smells, oh, let me tell you, it smells lovely in here. So how are we going to sum this thing up? Well, I think we need to split it into two parts. Things we know and things we don't know. The things we know is that this car is going to be mind-scramblingly fast. We also know it's going to have that repeatability of performance that Porsche is famous for, and that build quality that they do better than anyone else. We also know it's going to cost many millions of pounds when it's eventually finished. What we don't know is whether Porsche is going to be able to make a pure electric car as exciting as one with a petrol engine. And that's the real challenge.